If someone had told Umuuka that sleeping with his brother's wife would be the end of him, he would have laughed and doubted it. He had wealth. He had power. He had everything, except the one woman his brother loved. And for that forbidden desire, he opened a door no man should ever touch. It all begins in the village of Umuuka. Peace once walked among men, until greed invited the gods to watch. They say when blood is spilled in silence, the earth does not forget. It whispers beneath the soil, waiting for the wind to carry the truth. And tonight, that truth awakens. It was early morning in the quiet village of Umuuka. The first light crept over the thatched huts, and the cock crowed 3 times. Smoke curled from small fires, the smell of yam and palm oil drifting through the air. Inside one mud house, a woman sat by the hearth, lost in thought. Her name was Cynthia. Her eyes were tired, her heart heavier than the mortar beside her. For 7 long years, she had waited for a cry of a child. But the gods were silent. The walls heard her prayers. The fire witnessed her tears. Her husband, Chinedu, was a good man. A man of peace and quiet strength. He believed in honor and hard work. He loved his wife deeply, even when pain lived in their home. When others mocked him for having no child, he smiled and said softly, "The gods are not asleep." He never raised his voice against Cynthia. He only raised his hands to bless her. Every morning, Chinedu worked the farm beneath the harsh sun. He shared food with strangers, gave to the poor even when his own barn was half empty. The villagers often said, "Chinedu's heart is purer than gold." And they were right. But Chinedu's kindness was also his weakness. He trusted too much, forgave too easily. That would become both his strength and his downfall. Cynthia loved her husband with all her soul. But pain changes a woman. She cried alone at night, took countless herbs, and asked the gods one question over and over. Why me? Each month brought disappointment. Each prayer ended in silence. Her laughter faded into whispers of regret. Yet every dawn, Chinedu's voice would comfort her, gentle as the morning breeze. One day, the gods will remember us, he said. We only need to keep faith. And for a while, peace returned to their home. They shared quiet meals. They prayed beneath the moon. They dreamt of a child whose laughter would fill the compound. But sometimes, peace is only the pause before a storm. And far away, that storm was already gathering, carrying a familiar name. He returned one evening when the sun melted into the hills. His name was Umuuka, Chinedu's younger brother. Handsome, charming, a man whose tongue dripped with honey and poison. Umuuka had been gone for 10 years. Once, he and Cynthia had shared laughter and innocent dreams as childhood friends. But when he traveled abroad, he vanished. No letters, no word, only silence. Now he was back, with wealth, stories, and a dangerous smile. When he arrived, the village rejoiced. Chinedu welcomed him with open arms. My brother, you have returned home. And Cynthia? Her heart trembled. She smiled, but her soul stirred with memories she thought long buried. At first, everything seemed harmless. Umuuka brought gifts, spoke of faraway lands and cities filled with lights. He told stories that made the children laugh and the elders listen. But behind that laughter hid something dark. Something that watched Cynthia every time she moved. Where Chinedu was humble, Umuuka was proud. Where Chinedu gave, Umuuka took. And soon, what he wanted most was not wealth, but his brother's peace. Life continued in Umuuka. Chinedu began a new contract for his palm wine trade. It took him away for weeks, traveling across neighboring villages. He trusted Umuuka to watch over his home, never seeing the shadow creeping behind his back. While Chinedu was gone, Umuuka lingered. He brought food, fetched water, repaired the roof. At first, Cynthia thanked him. Then she began to rely on him. Loneliness has a way of blinding the heart. Umuuka knew it. He studied every sigh, every silence, every look of longing that passed through Cynthia's tired eyes. He whispered to her softly, "A woman like you deserves happiness." His words melted into her weakness. Days turned into nights of uneasy peace. One evening, rain fell hard, trapping them together. They spoke of the past, of youth, laughter, and dreams that never returned. Cynthia laughed again for the first time in years. She felt alive, and afraid of that feeling. That night, the moon watched in silence. Its pale light slipped through the cracks of the hut, touching two hearts that should never have been alone. Cynthia sat by the fire, her eyes lost in the flames. Umuuka spoke softly beside her, his words sweet like palm wine, words that found their way into the cracks of her pain. He reached out slowly and took her hand. At first, she tried to pull away, but his touch was warm, familiar, like a memory she once buried. "You've suffered too long," he whispered. "You deserve to feel alive again." Her heart beat louder than the drums of the night. She wanted to run, but her body stayed. Tears shimmered in her eyes, caught between guilt and longing. The wind outside grew stronger, as if the gods themselves tried to warn them. But neither listened. And in that stolen silence, under the pale moonlight, a mistake was born, one that could never be undone. Weakness met desire. As the thunder rumbled, Umuuka moved closer. His charm turned to hunger. And in a moment of weakness, temptation conquered reason. And a single moment became a lifetime of regret. Under the pale moonlight, a mistake was born, one that could never be undone. Months passed. Cynthia found herself with child. Joy filled the compound. Chinedu danced like a boy again, his laughter echoing through the morning air. For the first time in years, he smiled without pain. He named the boy Akedi, the strength of the land. But Cynthia's heart was heavy, for the blood in the boy's veins was not Chinedu's, but Umuuka's. Still, she could not destroy her husband's happiness. So she buried her guilt deep beneath her smiles. The villagers rejoiced. They said the gods had finally remembered Chinedu. They never knew the truth. That betrayal now lived under his own roof. Years rolled by. Akedi grew tall and fearless, just like Chinedu. He learned to farm, to pray, to respect his elders. Chinedu was proud, never suspecting that the son he loved most carried another man's seed. But Cynthia knew. And every time she looked at her son, she saw both her sin and her sorrow. Sometimes late at night she would whisper, "Forgive me, my child." But the wind carried her voice away, and the gods remained silent. They say the heart can hide what the eyes cannot. And though the river may look calm, no one knows what lies beneath. In Umuuka, peace began to fade like dying embers. The same joy that once lit Chinedu's home slowly turned to silence. A silence heavy enough to crush a soul. Chinedu had begun to fall sick. At first, it was small, a cough, a fever, a tiredness that came and went like a restless wind. But soon his strength began to fail. His hands trembled when he held his hoe. His steps grew weak on the red earth path. The villagers whispered. Some said it was witchcraft. Others said it was the wrath of forgotten ancestors. But only the gods knew the truth. Chinedu had been poisoned. No one saw who did it, and no one knew when. But the poison worked slowly, burning his body from within, stealing his breath piece by piece. One night, as the moon hid behind clouds, Cynthia watched him struggle to breathe. His once broad chest rose and fell like waves in a storm. Sweat glistened on his skin. He tried to smile at her, but his lips trembled. "My love," he whispered, "if I die tonight, promise me, you will care for our son." Cynthia's tears fell freely. Her heart broke. Not just for his suffering, but for the secret that was killing her faster than the poison. "You will not die," she said softly. "The gods will not allow it." But deep inside, she feared the gods had long turned their faces away. Days passed. Chinedu's condition worsened. The once strong man who tilled the earth with pride now lay weak upon a mat. Umuuka came often, his face carved with false concern. He brought herbs. He brought food. He even brought laughter. But every smile carried guilt. Every visit reminded him of his sin. For deep in his chest, his heart was not clean. He loved Cynthia still, and that love had destroyed everything pure around him. One afternoon, Chinedu called both Cynthia and Umuuka to his side. His voice was faint, but steady. "My brother," he said, "if I do not live to see Akedi become a man, promise me you will stand by him. Protect him as your own blood." Emeka's eyes trembled. He nodded, unable to speak. Cynthia turned away, her tears falling like rain. "Do not cry, my wife," Chinedu said weakly. "Our love is strong enough to live beyond this life." And then, he smiled. A smile too peaceful for a man dying of poison. Perhaps he already knew. Perhaps the gods had whispered the truth into his fading heart. Before dawn, Chinedu's spirit slipped quietly into the night. The cock crowed once, and silence followed. The village mourned him deeply. Men carried his body to the forest edge, wrapped in white cloth, chanting songs of farewell. Women wailed. Children cried. Even the wind seemed to pause. Cynthia knelt beside his grave, her body trembling, her hands pressed into the red soil, as though she could pull him back to life. "Forgive me," she whispered. "Forgive me for everything." But the earth remained still. Only the leaves rustled softly, as though Chinedu's spirit had become the wind itself. The days after Chinedu's death were long and hollow. The compound felt empty, too quiet. Only the wind moved through his abandoned farm. And every time Cynthia passed by, she felt the ghosts of her past whisper her name. After his burial, Emeka tried to leave the village. But something kept him there. A curse of his own making. Each night he heard Chinedu's voice calling his name. Each morning he saw Cynthia's face and the boy. And guilt ate him like fire. He drank to forget. He wandered aimlessly through the market. His eyes hollow, his heart heavy. The villagers began to whisper again. Chinedu's brother is not the same. Perhaps the spirit of the dead does not sleep. They were right. For guilt is a spirit that never dies. Days later, she met Emeka secretly under an old Udala tree. "Emeka," she whispered, "the gods are restless. I keep seeing Chinedu in my dreams." Emeka's face darkened. He turned away. Dreams are for women. Forget the past. It is buried. But Ifeoma shook her head. "No, it's not buried. I see him every night. He looks at me like he knows." Emeka's voice rose. "Enough. You will destroy us both if you continue." She stepped closer, tears in her eyes. "Destroy? You destroyed us the night you came into my home." He grabbed her arm roughly. "You think I regret it? You were mine before he took you. You loved me first." Ifeoma's voice trembled. "I was young, foolish, and now I carry that sin every day." She broke free from his grip and ran. Emeka stood under the tree, breathing heavily. The wind howled through the branches like a curse. Cynthia raised Ikedi alone. She poured her heart into him, teaching him wisdom, kindness, and courage. All the things Chinedu once embodied. Ikedi grew strong. He reminded her of the man she had lost, and of the sin she could never forget. At night, she would sit by the fire and tell him stories. Stories about his father, the man who believed the gods were never asleep. And as the boy listened, a spark of destiny burned quietly in his eyes. The same destiny that would one day reveal the truth, and make the earth remember what it buried. But for now, the night in Umuuka grew darker. Emeka's heart began to rot from within. He dreamed of blood, of forgiveness he could never find. One evening, after too much palm wine, he stumbled into the forest, calling Chinedu's name as though the dead could answer. He fell to his knees beneath the old Irako tree, his voice trembling. "Brother, forgive me." The wind howled through the branches, and for a moment, just a moment, he thought he heard a whisper in return. "The gods are not asleep." He ran from the forest that night, but he could never run from the truth. That is how peace ended in Umuuka. Not with thunder, but with silence. The kind of silence that only guilt and broken hearts can create. I'm years drifted by like dry leaves carried by the wind. The story of Chinedu became a tale whispered by old women beside the fire. Only one person carried the truth in her chest. Cynthia. The boy, Ikedi, grew into a man. Strong, brave, but proud. Too proud. He was a reflection of both men who shaped his blood. Chinedu's goodness, and Emeka's hidden darkness. Sometimes, when Cynthia looked into her son's eyes, she saw Chinedu's calm smile. Other times, she saw Emeka's cunning fire, and that fire scared her. The village had changed. New traders, new faces. But old sin still walked its red roads. Umuuka had grown wealthy. His name carried power across the region. He wore fine robes, gold on his wrists. But his nights were haunted. Each dream carried the same voice. Soft, but heavy as thunder. The gods are not asleep. He woke drenched in sweat, his heart pounding like drums in a burial procession. Sometimes, he swore he saw Chinidu's shadow by the door. Sometimes, when he looked at Ikedi, it was as though the boy's eyes pierced straight through his soul. Ikedi had his father's charm. At least what he thought was his father. He was respected by men and adored by women. But pride is a dangerous seed. And pride, when watered by lies, grows into a tree of destruction. He began to question his mother. Why do people whisper when I pass? Why do some elders look away when I greet them? Cynthia would smile, hide her tears, and say, "Pay them no mind, my son. The world fears greatness before it bows to it." But deep down, she trembled. She knew one day, the truth she buried would rise, like bones refusing to stay beneath the earth. One evening, when the wind howled strange, a festival was held in Umuuka, a night of songs, laughter, and masks. Even the stars seemed to dance. Umuuka sat proudly among the elders, his cup full of palm wine, his smile sharp as a blade. Ikedi stood by the fire, his mother beside him. And in that light, the truth began to move. The village priest, old and blind, rose to speak blessings upon the people. But as his hand trembled over the flames, his eyes, those empty sockets, turned toward Ikedi. "The child of two brothers," he murmured, "born of sin, raised by guilt. The blood of betrayal flows in him." The crowd froze. Cynthia's breath caught. Umuuka's heart stopped. And Ikedi stared in confusion. "What do you mean, priest?" he demanded. "Speak clearly." But the old man only whispered, "Ask the woman who bore you. Ask the man who buried his brother." Then he collapsed. Chaos followed. Cynthia's body shook with tears she could no longer hide. Ikedi grabbed her arms, his voice breaking. "Mother, tell me the truth." Her lips trembled. She looked at him, and saw Chinidu's spirit standing behind his eyes. "You are not your father's son," she whispered. "The night your father traveled for palm wine trade, I was weak. Your uncle." Ikedi's grip tightened. "Stop," he shouted. "No. Say it's a lie." But Umuuka rose slowly, his face pale as ash. "It's true," he said. "I am your father." The words shattered the night. Men gasped. Women screamed. The fire dimmed, as though even the flames could not bear to see the truth. They say when truth is revealed, it does not whisper, it screams. And in that scream, Ikedi heard his world shatter. All my life, I called another man father. I carried his name, his kindness, his pride. But the blood in my veins is a curse I never asked for. In that moment, the boy became a storm born of love, betrayal, and the silence of the gods. For even the purest heart can break when it learns its blood was built on sin. The gods. Ikedi's world turned black. The gods had played a cruel game with his blood. He looked at Umuuka, his so-called father, and rage boiled in him like thunder in a storm. "You destroyed everything," he roared. "You killed my mother's peace. You killed my father's life." Umuuka tried to speak, but Ikedi had already drawn the same knife his uncle once used. The gods were watching. The wind began to rise. "No man escapes his blood," whispers softly, "for the earth remembers every drop spilled upon it." The fight was brutal. Rain began to fall, as though the sky itself was mourning. Lightning flashed, and with it came screams, echoing across Umuuka. Blood met the soil. The circle was complete. When the storm settled, Umuuka lay still, his body broken, his sins washed into the red earth. Ikedi fell beside him, his eyes empty, his soul hollow. Cynthia rushed to his side, her tears mixing with the rain. "My son," she whispered, "forgive me." But Ikedi only said, "Mother, I am tired. Let the gods judge us all. He closed his eyes. And silence returned to Umuuka. Days later, the villagers buried both men side by side. The brothers who loved and destroyed each other. Cynthia walked away from the grave. Her steps slow. Her spirit drained. She looked once more toward the horizon and said softly, "The gods may forgive, but the earth never forgets." The wind carried her words across the land. And once again, Umuuka fell silent. The kind of silence that tells a story. So, my dear listener, remember, not all enemies come from afar. Sometimes they share your blood. Sometimes they sit at your table. Sometimes they leave with you, smiling in the daylight, yet carrying a shadow you cannot see. Trust is a fragile gift. Once broken, even love bleeds. The heart is deep, but the earth is deeper, and it buries nothing forever. So tread gently with those who call you brother. Speak softly with those who say I love you. For even in the warmth of family, the cold hands of betrayal may still be waiting. Remember, the gods may forgive, but the earth never forgets. If you found my story interesting, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. 4 more thrilling stories ahead. Each tale carries a heartbeat, each voice a lesson, and each story a truth the earth refuses to bury. Join the circle, my friend, where words have power, silence has meaning, and the gods are never asleep.